All right, welcome back to the LOOPcast, Catholic Vote's weekly rundown of all things faith, culture, and politics. As always, I'm here with Josh, editor of The Loop, Erica, staff writer, and me, the host. So this week, we have a document situation. We would be remiss to not bring up that Donald Trump had Mar-a-Lago raided over classified documents, and it's coming to light that Joe Biden also wasn't very secure with some of his top secret documents. What's going on, Josh? What's the current situation?
Well, we had reported on this before that classified documents taken during when Biden was vice president, these documents were found at a think tank in D.C. called the Penn Biden Center. It's part of the University of Pennsylvania. And one of these documents was labeled SEI, which is the highest level of classification. And the thing about this story is it has this kind of drip, drip, drip effect, because we had reported on that already. Mm-hmm. Then you find out that the New York Post did a story that the University of Pennsylvania received significantly more money over the last few years. They went from $31 million in foreign donations to over $100 million in foreign donations in just 3 years. And some of that money came from, in fact, 54 million of it from the Chinese Communist government. Yeah. So, I mean, here's what gets interesting about this, too, though, is because the University of Pennsylvania is a private university, there's not the ability to do FOIA requests like if it were a state-run university. So like other times where there's something amiss going on, let's say at Georgia Tech, you could do FOIA requests and try to get this, information. And governments tend to stonewall on FOIA requests, but ultimately it's the law. They have to abide, and sometimes you have to go to court. They don't have that situation here. University of Pennsylvania can be kind of, quiet about it. It's a private university. So, well, what we have now is more documents that are being found at Joe Biden's residence and inside his car even. I mean, it's getting to be kind of ludicrous. Even Merrick Garland felt the need to appoint a special counsel to like investigate these documents.
And it takes a lot to get him
awesome.
to move. We know from experience.
Yeah, I mean, in my liberal senator, Debbie Stabenow out of Michigan, she had felt compelled. She's not even running again. She announced she's not running for re-election, but she felt compelled to say that this was embarrassing, that what Biden did. So you're starting to see Democrats really push back pretty aggressively at their president. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, they're like so happy that he did, better than expected in the midterms. Oh, he's doing great. Looking forward to 2024. And then now, man, it's like they're late for the door with this guy. And as more and more, documents get discovered in all these seemingly random places. And the question is, why was President Biden's private, attorneys who don't have top secret clearance, why were they the ones going to these places to look for the classified documents? Like they don't have clearance. They shouldn't be doing this. They should report this to the Department of Justice or the FBI and let them handle the situation. So it's just a lot of questions that President Biden has. He's opened up a can of worms here, and it just it has this effect where, I always say Josh Mercer's rule of scandals. Scandals have to be easy to explain for the American people to care, whether that's fair or not. So Benghazi, it's like it was kind of hard to explain. It's like it wasn't just that they were asleep at the wheel; that they were really negligent, and people get lost. Sex scandals are super easy for people to get it. Like, okay, yeah, right. I get it. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is a case where people get it, that there are top secret files and you left them out somewhere. You shouldn't have had them. You left them at, this think tank at the university, or you left them in your house and you weren't supposed to. Yeah. It's very simple to understand. And I think that's why this one might be a little bit more sticky than other scandals.
Yeah, I mean, the university is one thing, but then also to be in his garage he made it very clear he had a Corvette, by the way. I have a Corvette. It was next to the Corvette. That clip was awesome.
In a locked garage.
In a locked garage, so no one would ever go in there.
Classified material next to your Corvette. What were you thinking?
Let me, we're going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay, so it's not like you're sitting out in the street.
So
but anyway,
was in a locked garage.
Yes, as well as my Corvette.
That level of negligence is odd, and it just, like you said, it makes sense. It's top secret. We shouldn't just be playing around with top secret documents. I mean, same criticism goes for Trump for having Mar-a-Lago, but one thing you didn't see was an FBI raid of Joe Biden's garage. There's no photo ops. There's none of that. So let's just put that out there. But then Erica, with this house situation too, the house was supposedly owned by Hunter Biden at one point, or he was somehow involved. So weird.
It just gets weirder and weirder. So yesterday, there was the story that came out that this house in Wilmington, Delaware, where these classified documents were discovered, was actually Hunter Biden claimed on his tax documents that he had it was a background screening test document that came up on his laptop, that he was paying almost $50,000 a month to his father to live at this house in Wilmington. In the same document, he also claimed to own the property. So it just gets more and more bizarre. Like anytime Hunter Biden shows up and there's classified documents in the house and he's kind of mixed up in these international business deals that his dad might or might not have known about, I just let's start asking some questions. And to me, one of the interesting things about this week was to actually watch MSNBC and CNN start to cover the story. The fact that they were even talking about this and asking questions about this, not in any brilliant way. I wasn't impressed with their investigative journalism going on, but the fact that they even acknowledged this story is happening and unrolling, I should say.
Yeah.
It was telling. I mean,
and a lot of them were
I don't know, Josh.
They're running defense for okay, this is much different than the Trump situation or whatever. But they're
The View, yeah, they were like, it's
they
different.
did that for a while,
right? But not.
It did change
for a couple days,
right? It did change.
The tone has changed. They're not
shifted,
friendly. Yeah. So, Josh, my question is, the Oracle of Petoskey, is this a story? Was this deliberately dropped to start to unravel the Biden campaign for 2024? Is this, I don't want to get all QAnon on anybody here, but is what's going on with this story coming out?
Well, it is amazing though, because I mean, it is like that there must be, I mean, you would like to say that there's some secret, list of people that are on, all these journalists and think tank guys and TV pundits, and a memo goes out and everyone shifts their tone and everything that they say. And I say that jokingly, it seems like that, but in fact, we know that's true. Actually, that was a story that blew up about 10 years ago. There's this thing called the Journal List, and these guys would email each other and they would just go back and forth about how we should think about this, how we should cover this. And it's like, oh my gosh, conservatives have been complaining forever about the seemingly collusion amongst the media. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, not this again. You guys are crazy conspiracy theorists. And it's like, you know what? Am I a conspiracy theorist if I'm right every time? I mean, and you still argue with me. What is going on? I don't understand this. But no, it does feel like, a definite change in tone. And you ask yourself, why is that the case? Maybe they realize that, Trump is kind of stumbling in his presidential campaign. I've always said that Biden, so long as Trump is doing well, Biden can say, I'm the only guy who beat this guy. You need to stick with me because I'm the only guy who can beat him. Mm-hmm. But if Trump is kind of stumbling, then the Democratic Party can go, well, we don't have to have Biden. And he's over 80 now. Let's get rid of him. Let's get someone new. Well, the thing is, so I always say this, political parties always do the smartest thing. No, that's not true.
No.
So if the Democratic Party were wise, I think they would nominate Gavin Newsom. I mean, I think he's horrible. I think he's a terrible human being.
Right.
But if you want to do the best for your own party, I would assume that that's who they would want to pick. But I do think this kind of shifting away from Biden is that they realize he's old news and they're going to go with the new person, which is the vice president. They're going to build up Kamala Harris, because how are they not going to? There's no way you have a sitting vice president. She's going to be the next in line. It's going to be overwhelming. I can't imagine they'd say, oh, no, we're not going to nominate a black woman. We're going to go with this white governor from California. I just don't see that. I don't see that working for most Democratic voters. So it does feel, though, that this shift away from Biden, oh, this is terrible, all these documents. I mean, it's a 180 from what they treated the story like for the first week or so. But as more and more revelations came, it was like word went out from on high. and they just totally did a shift in everything that they said. It was crazy.
Yeah, it does feel like in a lot of ways they're kind of setting Biden up for failure. And I think specifically, I got that feeling over Martin Luther King Jr. Day. They trotted him out to, first off, he gave an address at a black church, and then he gave a speech at a breakfast. And Martin Luther King Jr., say what you want, but what I think the message is larger than the man, to treat people on the contents of their character rather than their skin color. And that to me is kind of the purpose of the day. I mean you can make arguments about, his personal
He's
life,
treated
whatever.
like a saint.
Yeah.
He's treated like, whether or not, yes, he had some difficulties in his personal life and some things that, we're not going to get into that critique now, but the whole point is there's no question that like, he's got like what, a 95% approval rating amongst Americans, And so like, this is a day that could be for unity, and Democrats always use it as a way to say Republicans aren't good enough and they need to embrace critical race theory.
So,
and you're like, what?
So here's where that comes up, right? Because he's giving this speech, and so here were some of the topics. I went in thinking maybe he would use this as an opportunity for unity. So he attacked fiscally demented Republicans, direct quote, said he was ready to work with Republicans, but if any of the bills proposed so far reach his desk, he will veto them. He asked for a ban on assault weapons and actually directly threatened just everyday Americans, painted the target, said, you don't need AR-15s when I have F-15s. I mean, I can play the clip.
Yeah.
It's pretty like, why would you even say that?
I love my right-wing friends who talk about the tree of liberty is water with the blood of patriots. If you need to work about taking on the federal government, you need some F-15s. You don't need an AR-15. I'm serious. Think about it.
Talked about protecting abortion, pardoning drug possession, talked about Brittany Griner. And then, my favorite part is he tried to sing happy birthday to a relative of Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King III's wife, and he forgot her name. I mean, it truly was like out of the office funny.
It was out of the office. Yeah.
So
happy birthday, dear Valen. Happy birthday to you. Well,
it just reminds me though that in politics, people think that politics is like, that Netflix show that had
West Wing or whatever.
Kevin Spacey that was called
House of Cards. Yeah.
That's what they think. That's what people think that politics is really like. And it's like, nah, dude, it's more like Veep, where you got Selena Meyer, and she's just like, it's just a circus show a lot of times, and it's so much of it is absurd. Yeah. And so, this
right, but that was absurd. But I feel like they knew. Like they keep Biden in the basement for most of his presidency, and they bring him out. It's like they let him
out yesterday,
right? And this is the same guy that said he's going to put y'all back in chains, right? He doesn't have a great record in terms of race relations, so why would you let him off the leash?
Oh, for the Democratic Party, they consider that to be a great record. Are you kidding me?
So,
Democratic Party uses race relations as a way to weaponize. It's not a source of unity for them. It's a way to bludgeon Republican voters and Republican politicians. I don't know. I mean, of course.
Yeah.
And that's what that speech was yesterday. It was just bludgeoning. Especially for me, it was the line about that you don't need AR-15s when we have F-15s. I was like, this is the opposite of MLK and like what he stood for, like the lowly man marching on Washington. And then to have this, don't worry, we have the F-15s. Put down your weapons.
Yeah, not very peaceful protest.
Not peaceful
protest. The sense of unity, though, that gets me so crazy about this is that, this is not really a national holiday in the United States. It's more of a national feast day, truly the way it's just revered, and fine, that's fine, whatever. But what gets me about this is that there's no better way to super anger a lefty on Twitter or Facebook or whatever than for a Republican politician or conservative voter to invoke MLK. You would think Democrats would be like, this is awesome. This guy who we celebrate as our hero, everyone in the whole country is supporting him. And no, it drives them absolutely bonkers. So the governor of Virginia is Republican, talks glowingly about MLK and his legacy. And you just look at the comments and there's all these lefties screaming into the void. How dare you? How dare I honor this hero? It's just hilarious. It's like, no, don't you realize you're terrible? You're white, so you have to hate other white people. You have to hate yourself. It's like so crazy.
But it just seems to me like MLK Day, there's almost like no home for anyone anymore, because people that are truly far, far left, they all prefer Malcolm X over MLK for the most part. In terms of like, think about what we've seen: Black-owned businesses, reparations, like making alternate societies, segregation again. Like you see it in colleges, you see it everywhere. That's become more of the preferred course of action. And then people to the right, people like normal right-wing voters, you can't even talk about MLK, because then you get maligned as some type of racist, or you're using him as a prop or something. And then,
I mean, when you think about it, like we had this discussion on the redefinition of marriage, all this kind of stuff. And, it was obviously an attempt to make sure that the federal government would concretize so-called gay marriages. But the debate over like whether or not whites and blacks could get married, like no one disagrees with that. You look at the polling and it's like, of course, everyone's like, it's like 95% or something like that. And so it just goes to like in so many ways, Martin Luther King is triumphant. And it's like, you can't, it's like, to me, it's just kind of crazy how the left, they win on this. I mean, of course, I think it transcends left or right, obviously. But the thing is like, you can't just take the win. Like you won on this issue. Like everyone agrees, like, but then as you point out, Tom, it's not that. It's they don't want harmony between the races, at least the hardcore left-wing activists who are out there preaching critical race theory. They don't want harmony.
Something that we were all able to take away from Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy is peaceful protests. I mean, he was kind of like the pioneer in America of a peaceful protest for a good end. And this week, this Friday, we have one of the largest peaceful protests in the entire country, the March for Life, and we will be there. So I brought on Tom McClusky, Catholic Vote's DC correspondent and lobbyist, for an interview on a few pro-life bills, and then also what this march actually means. So go to the interview now. All right, today I have on Tom McClusky, Catholic Vote's DC correspondent and lobbyist. We bring him on today because we need some clarity. So we have some pro-life bills kind of brewing in the House right now, and one has already been voted on. So I'd like to address that one first. So we have HR 26. It's essentially a bill that would make healthcare practitioners provide medical care to a child that survives an abortion attempt. And it was actually passed. So, Tom, how did this bill start, and how could someone possibly oppose this?
Well, the bill started actually about 20 years ago, because there was language that had no teeth. There was no enforcement to it, called Born Alive Protection Act, that was passed in the early 2000s. It was supported by a majority of Democrats, which probably explains why it didn't have any teeth. But even Chuck Schumer voted for it. But what we found was that babies were still surviving abortions and being left to die. Jill Stanek, if you remember her, she was a nurse who in Chicago who famously like outed the hospital system for doing this, and for that she lost her job. She's now with Susan B. Anthony List. However, there was no way to prosecute hospital staff or healthcare professionals who would leave these babies to die. So that's why for the last 20 years we've been trying to pass this bill, the Born Alive Protection, which has teeth. And finally it passed. Now it goes to the Senate, where unfortunately I do not believe Chuck Schumer will be bringing this bill up.
Right, and why? Why is the bill not being brought up? It seems pretty common sense. You would want to take care of a baby that's been born.
Well, if you look at some of the rhetoric that was coming out of the Democrats, and this is kind of how far they've devolved, just even in the last 20, if not 10 years, whereas any encroachment on the abortionist or the abortion industry is seen as a huge offense. It's almost as bad as if you misgendered somebody at a college fair. And so the Democrats, their arguments against the bill were so ridiculous that one female congresswoman, I think from California, of course, Democrat, argued that if you pass this bill, that means that there won't be enough time to bring the baby to the hospital. I mean, the remarkable thing is she calls it a baby, except it's a matter of and it also shows how far the abortion industry has fallen, if it could fall anymore, is that they're doing a lot of these abortions even without healthcare professionals present.
Right. And I actually did, the conversation on the floor was very revealing, because there was also a representative from Michigan that quoted the Bible saying that the Bible doesn't say anything about the government, that the Lord didn't place the baby in the mother's womb, not the government's womb. And it was just like the most bizarre. It almost felt like she had never read the Bible, but she was reading it off like it was some type of like evidence-based thing. So to not take care of a child that was born after an abortion attempt.
Yeah, I think, I mean, what do we call them? Catholic, cafeteria Catholics, where
Yeah, right.
I'll find the quote that fits me by using Google, but I'm not going to actually, it's a big book. I don't want to actually read the thing.
Right. Yeah, I know. It was really disturbing, and it almost felt like there was a lot of grasping at straws. It was a well-constructed resolution, because there's really no way to sound humane and be against it. And it's really sad it's not even going to be brought up in the Senate, because there would be fireworks. So I think this is an example of what some people would call a show vote, where it's probably going to die, but we bring it up anyway. Can you explain further like what a show vote is and why it's even being done if it doesn't really matter?
I hate to say it doesn't really matter, but I see two reasons for doing votes like this, show votes, though I call them show votes as well. One is, and I apologize to any politicians who are listening. Of course, I'm not talking about you. However, politicians are kind of like dogs, and you have to train them. So now we've trained the House of Representatives that for the first month at the beginning of Congress, when you're pro-life, vote for this bill. Now we need to elect pro-life senators over on the Senate side, and we need to elect a pro-life president. To do that, it takes time. It takes years. And these bills, the secondary reason for these bills is not just to educate the members, but to educate the public. Now the public, they're talking about this. What is born alive? Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, that's atrocious. And the Democrats support this? And we've seen great examples of this, that even when bills fail, the best example I could think of is during the Obama presidency, we tried to defund Planned Parenthood, a possible task under President Obama. But it got all the way to the government was shut down over it. And we lost. We didn't get to defund the government. But then you saw Texas defund Planned Parenthood. You saw Tennessee defund Planned Parenthood, Oklahoma defund Planned Parenthood. So sometimes it can inspire the states like, maybe we should try that on a local level, since we're more of in a red state, a more pro-life state.
Right. And speaking of things we want to kind of put on the public consciousness, we at Catholic Vote have had a very detailed tracker of attacks on Catholic churches and pregnancy resource centers. And so now we're seeing in the House a bill is kind of being constructed to actually vocally condemn violence against pregnancy resource centers. There's been so many politicians, Elizabeth Warren really comes to mind with this one, that nasty rhetoric against pregnancy resource centers that are really just trying to provide mothers in a tough spot with some help, calling them fake clinics, being deceptive. So where do you see this bill going? Is it going to be another example of something that comes through and just dies in the Senate? What's going to come out of this?
Well, first, if I could do a CV brag, in that a lot of great organizations started, and the USCCB was the first one to start tracking the violence. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops was the first one to start tracking violence against churches.
Makes sense.
However, when you talk to members of Congress, when you hear them speak on the floor, when you see their press releases, it's the Catholic Vote tracker they're talking about. Because the staff at Catholic Vote really, we started, thanks to the Loop and things like that, we started getting churches and pregnancy care centers were informing us at the same time that they were informing the police, so that we could keep track of it. So that's why this has been such a prominent thing, and it's gained me a lot of cred up on the Hill when we're talking about this issue. So yeah, and I always appreciate getting cred when I don't have to work for it. Now, the House resolution that passed condemns these attacks, and it's kind of a sense of Congress, like, okay, these attacks were bad. 3 Democrats joined on to this resolution, because who could support, you would think, who could support these attacks? Now, well, that's a sense of Congress. A vote right during that same week was a vote to establish the Weaponizing the Federal Government Committee, which is going to be seen most likely. Jim Jordan is going to be one of the co-chair. We've been working very close with him, a congressman from Ohio. Mm-hmm. And that's where you're going to see, because the questions for the Department of Justice are almost too numerous to name, except one is, why are you going after pro-lifers like the Houck family who are praying peacefully in front of, or protecting their children in front of pregnancy care, in front of abortuaries? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you have hundreds of churches and pregnancy care centers being firebombed. Yeah. And the federal government, which has a role in this, has really been doing nothing.
Yeah, totally. I think some people are referring to it as the WTF committee, correct?
Right. I originally heard that from Congressman Chip Roy, and I've not been able to get it on my head. Being the person that I am, I have not been able to ask anybody, what does WTF actually mean, and why is everybody laughing about it? But I'll just go with it.
There feels like a new wave of excitement after we finally have some people in the House that are willing to go after what has, I think, been seen by the public as a really overreach by the Department of Justice, a weaponization of seemingly nonpartisan establishment, like the FBI, the CIA, etc. The FBI specifically has been really bad. So will this make meaningful change, this resolution? Do you see any type of accountability for the Biden administration, for the Department of Justice, for turning a blind eye to very obvious attacks on faith centers, pregnancy resource centers?
This is one of those, like I call them, having faith in the Holy Spirit or God moments, where, because it's not just those two things that I mentioned, the forming of the committee and the passing of the resolution. You add in the Catholic Vote tracker and other trackers and everybody talking about this. But at the same time, what the members of Congress, the 20 Republicans who held up the speaker vote, they wanted policy changes within Congress. And these policy changes could put you to sleep. I mean, who cares about how things are done and how the sausage is made? However, the changes they made really helped put teeth into this committee. Congressman Jim Jordan, we both wrestled the same weight I'm a little bit older than him, but we both wrestled the same weight in college. The only reason I don't like him, I like him every other reason, except he still is the same weight he wrestled in college. I am not. So
note to self: don't mess with Tom McClusky. Seriously, I didn't know you wrestled.
But wrestlers are tenacious. We're thick-headed. And if we hold on to something, and that's where Jim Jordan is. So I think out of all the oversight that's going to be done, that committee and Jim Jordan, I think we're going to see the most fruit.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to that, and not going to wrestle you anytime soon. So, Tom, you spent some time with the March for Life. You're intimately familiar with how that goes. You've been a part of the pro-life movement for a long time. This March coming up here in 2023, post-Roe, what's the difference to you? How do you see this March being different than all of the previous year's marches?
Well, it's the 50th anniversary of the March. And I was running the Government Affairs Department and lobbying arm for a group called Family Research Council when I was approached by Jeannie, who I'd worked with previously, the head of the March for Life, to form a Government Affairs Department for the March for Life. And I didn't even have to hesitate to be able to work with such a legacy organization. And this year is different. Well, there are going to be I think a lot of things the same. You're going to see a lot of young faces marching. It's very inspiring for an old warhorse like me to go down to the march and see all these young people. And it's that feeling of, because in a town like DC, sometimes you could feel like you're alone. Or probably if you're in your high school running your pro-life club, you feel the exact same way. Yep. And then you come to Washington, DC and see hundreds of thousands. And it's always upbeat, but now I think it'll be a different kind of upbeat. And what we need to do now as pro-life organizations is equip the people who are coming to march, help promote state marches. March for Life started a state program, and give them something to do after they're marching. Marching is very important, except if they're marching, that shows that they care enough to get out in the freezing cold to march. We now need to teach them how do you contact your member of Congress? How do you contact your state legislator? What can you do to change your neighborhood, your school, to make it more pro-life? And I think you'll see more of a concentration. While the federal government still has a very large role to play, I think you'll see more of a concentration of what the states can do.
Yeah, and that leads in well too. So many people show up. There's so many enthusiasm, and guess what? CNN doesn't cover it, right? A lot of the major news outlets, they'll just put it in the back page somewhere, even though it's one of the largest marches in the country. So does your presence at the march matter in terms of making a difference legislatively? So because you're so in touch in DC, do people actually talk about the march? What actually influences them to act on behalf of pro-lifers across the country?
Well, one thing that's changing this year is the March for Life route is walking by the House offices. There's 3 buildings that house most of the offices. Because even when the route wasn't like that, legislators understand. Like the ones who are watching the news, and as you said, there's no mention of the March for Life. They know when they're driving into work that the March for Life is happening because most of the streets are closed. They know that there's hundreds of thousands of marchers, many of whom afterwards go to the offices of these legislators. It's the largest continuing peaceful demonstration in the world. And legislators understand that. You can go to a legislator and say, we have a mailing list of 100,000 people, and say you work on taxes or something like that, and they'll be impressed. Imagine a few 100,000 people showing up your door saying, be pro-life. Yeah. It gives an impression, and a number of members usually, when Congress is in town, they make a point of coming down, even though they're not going to. Imagine a member of Congress going to a stage with a microphone where he knows he's not going to speak. Because most members of Congress, you want them to show up, you put up a microphone, but they're showing up knowing they're not going to speak, and they march. And it's just a beautiful thing to see.
Absolutely. And I look forward to seeing you at this year's march. Thank you so much for taking the time for the interview, Tom. And yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Now that we're back from the interview, we will be going into Church Corner. So what's going on in the Catholic Church? Specifically today, it will be in the world. So we actually just lost a hero, really. He's smiling down on us from heaven right now. Father Isaac Aki. He is a Nigerian priest who unfortunately was martyred for his faith inside of his church. Erica, you did a lot of good research on this. Can you please lay out the story and we can talk about what it means?
Sure. It's a really moving account of his martyrdom because we actually have a witness. The other priest who is assigned to his parish, his parochial vicar, witnessed the martyrdom and was actually able to testify to what happened that night. So this was on January 15th, middle of the night, shortly after 3 a.m. 15 armed bandits stormed a rectory in central Nigeria, and they were shouting Allahu Akbar. This is a Muslim Islamic extremist faction, probably related to Boko Haram. The details are not yet known, but related to Boko Haram, there are a few different factions of that group in Nigeria that have been waging this terrible persecution on that country. The scale of it is hard to fathom, but what happened that night, the bandits shot both priests several times, wounding them, not fatal, and then they held them at gunpoint for probably a number of hours. The 2 priests were able to offer each other confession and absolution during that time, which is so beautiful. And then Father Aki, who's the pastor, Father Aki urged Father Ome to run, and Father Ome ran away. He was shot again, but managed to escape. He looked back and he saw that Father Aki was shot in the chest. And shortly thereafter, the bandits left the rectory, setting fire to it. And the assumption is that Father Aki died in that fire. He was burned to death. A great tragedy. And this is a common complaint in Nigeria when the police are called to these kinds of incidents, which are unfortunately very frequent. They don't show up, right? So the police arrive at the scene probably hours after the call, again, according to the surviving priest. Father Aki, and this really killed me. Father Aki, the martyr, had already survived the the major 2011 Christmas Day massacre. He was the pastor of a large church, and 25 of his parishioners were killed in front of him by a car bomb that was driven into the church compound, the property. So he had survived that. He'd been kidnapped a number of times and later released. But I think it's so important for American Christians to be aware. And I love that we cover this in the Loop regularly when there's there are major persecutions of the church going on. And the Nigerian persecution is certainly a genocide. I mean, the stated intention of Boko Haram is to eliminate all Christians. It was relegated to the northeastern part of the country. And now with this attack, we can see very clearly from far away that it's seeping into the central part of the country as well. The estimate is that in 2022, there were thousands of Christians killed and at least 17 Christian villages completely razed to the ground. So this is the scale of this. Is again, it's hard for us to fathom. This is what we read about from the Roman Empire, right? Like the Diocletian persecution. This is what we're thinking when we see this. And just to give a little context, Nigeria is a very large country. It's actually the United States' top economic partner on the African continent. So this is a major player. It's about half the size of Alaska. The state of Texas, to give you some context, is only about 75% as large as Nigeria. So this is a big place. So in terms of where this particular attack took place, I looked at the map. I did some Google satellite imagery, which I'd encourage everyone to do just to get to know the country. But this attack took place, if you were looking at a map of Texas, it's like these bandits have come down from the Panhandle and they're now in Austin. So we're talking center of the country. And really no Catholics northwest. It's as if no Catholics in Texas, northwest of Austin, are safe anymore, right? So I think for first world Catholics, we see our free speech being attacked. We see our children being targeted by this insane culture. But to understand that in other parts of the world, our brothers and sisters in the faith are dying. And these priests, they could get out, right? They could say, I want to be reassigned to the coastal region where it's safer, but they stay with their people in these towns. And this priest who died, Father Aki, he went back. I mean, he went back after being kidnapped, after witnessing the martyrdom of his flock. And we should be inspired and humbled by his example here in America.
Yeah, I mean, I just think our church in the United States today, we face a lot of issues and problems, and sometimes we get a little too bureaucratic, and it's like, you got to, a 2-year waiting period before you can get the sacrament of confirmation and all this kind of stuff. And you sort of lose sight of the heart of what the faith really is, And I think, stories like this can help bring that right back to the forefront and realize, in lots of Africa and obviously in Asia too, with China, the Catholic faith is persecuted. There are martyrs of this day. There are more people in slavery today than ever been before. We really have to, be a united church and have our hearts, our prayers united with them.
When I saw this story, all the arguments over liturgy or all of the theological, heady faith research, that kind of stuff, that speaks to some people. When people take a bullet for Jesus Christ, that speaks to me. I am so inspired by people that in that moment of courage, right? It doesn't just happen in the moment of courage. He obviously lived a very faithful life to get to the point where sacrificing himself for the flock. He could have easily, after the car bomb, called it quits, said, this is too much. I can't handle it. He went right back in there, died for his faith. And
here's a question for you, Tom, then.
What?
Would you take a bullet if you just thought it was a symbol?
No. Here's my point.
Would you take a bullet if it was, just so we can do kumbaya at Mass?
Here's my point.
I mean, it's like, what is this all about? What is the heart of what this faith is?
And I'm about to drive it home. We had real cowardice within our own church over the last 2 years. We were sold something that said that there was a threat of people dying, and we shut down our masses. We stopped administering the Eucharist. We stopped administering sacraments to people in America, where we don't have the Boko Haram around the corner waiting to burn down our churches. We had bishops in our own church shut down churches, stop administering the sacraments, take things down. I'm not here to say what information people are acting off of, but if people are literally dying in Africa over the faith, if during the Black Plague, priests are literally going out in the streets and doing Eucharistic processions and ministering to the sick, wake up. Like, it's just stuff like this. It just makes me even more mad that there was so much cowardice. If this was a symbol, that's fine. This isn't a symbol. This is Jesus Christ, right? And seeing people die for this just riles me up so much that we should never at another time allow our own leaders to ever stop administering the Eucharist. It's the source and summit of our faith.
I mean, the thing is, if you want, to go back to COVID, I mean, there was nothing wrong with saying, if you're, this is a plague going around. If you are particularly vulnerable, don't go to church because you might get sick or whatever, or keep 10 feet distance. I mean,
you're dispensed from your obligation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're dispensed from, I mean, that's always been the case, but you raised the right point. Like, okay, so, what about the people who I need Jesus more than I got to worry about being sick? And
we all need Jesus more than we are worried about.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I understand that.
Thank you for blunting my tip here, because I know this is extreme, but I have an edge to what I'm saying for a reason, because if we all believe this, make it happen, right? I mean, we got people dying overseas for this. So yeah, I just hope this is people take this story because it is an inspirational thing. I mean, we have so many martyrs in the rich Catholic tradition of our faith. I always go back to the Chinese martyrs, specifically Saint Mark, who was addicted to opioids and was told by a priest, stop coming to confession. I'm not going to keep forgiving you, which poor advice, but he just internally knew, I'm just never going to be able to go to heaven unless I have the red crown. Sure enough, around come people to persecute. He watched his entire family get killed in front of him, and then he thanked the Lord for the opportunity to go to heaven. And so we need to hear more stories like that. I think that people get too comfortable in going to the kumbaya, and we need to be hearing there's real edge to our faith. People died. Jesus Christ, the person we're emulating, died for us, for our faith. So we move into the Twilight Zone here. We got to bring us up a little bit. So Josh, you put yourself first in line. So what you got for us?
What's going on, Josh?
Well, I mean, one of these hilarious. I mean, it's certainly interesting. Consequences of the Dobbs decision is that that we're getting reports now that liberal men, especially in blue states, are going to they're getting vasectomies. And they're doing this. They're saying, "Oh, I'm really doing this for the women out there because
some real heroes.
I don't want to put them in a bad spot."
Heroes.
I mean, total hero. Oh my gosh, this one guy, conservative guy, kind of laughed at this and he thought, "Oh, this is great. There'll be less liberals in the world." It's just I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just a tough spot. I mean, I guess I'm glad that you're not going to impregnate a woman and then she would then go ahead and terminate the child. That would be horrible. So is it better to mutilate your body than to kill another person? I guess. Just as a Catholic, it's hard to get excited about this. It's there's such a better way to live your life. Don't sleep around and find happiness in marriage. Be happily miserable like every married couple is. Nah, it's a joke, of course. No, but I mean, it's
come on, Josh. It's not that bad.
I know. It's just
Laura,
teasing.
I'm not going to tell Laura you said that. Does she listen to
No, but I
LOOPcast?
mean, it's just, she never listens, so we're good.
I don't know if this is much more encouraging than vasectomies,
worse.
But this is
why it's the Twilight Zone, people.
All right, Miss Universe pageant. A world without the Miss Universe pageant would not be a poorer world in my estimation. But now Miss Universe is owned by a man. So at the end of the Miss Universe pageant, we get this guy who has had so many surgeries. You look at him and you're like, oh, it's a kind of strange looking female, but I mean, very made up. And then he opens his mouth and starts speaking like, oh, it's a guy. And so now he gets up on stage and he says, now Miss Universe will be owned by women. Trans women, and the audience just goes wild and everyone's like, adulation, isn't this the greatest thing ever? Empowerment. And I'm thinking,
of all identities.
It's a dude. So like, okay, so now we're going to have trans women up there. Well, so now we're going to have fat women, right? Like we can't do body shaming, so we can have men who are women. And pretty soon we're going to have fat men who are women and hairy men who are women.
Can I say though?
And there's going to be like guys in bikinis with their big guts and their hairy backs.
Is Miss Universe worth saving? Like, I always think like when we argue over this, it's like, was Miss Universe this great bastion of Western society to begin with? Like, I'm always kind of like, who cares? Like, yeah, run it into the ground.
Yeah, I'm like, let it die its own death in the dumpster fire of history. I don't know. I'm not a fan of the beauty pageant culture. I think there could be a healthy iteration of honoring what is feminine and beautiful and strong women. Like, I think that this could be a good thing. There could be an integrated vision and have women compete on the world stage and show these beautiful expressions from many cultures of what it is to be a woman. But I think we're so far gone in being able to achieve that what exists needs to just, like I said, burn in the dumpster fire of history, and we'll start again. Like,
that's an interesting
someday.
thought, though. Like, Erica, if you could redesign Miss Universe to accomplish all of said goals, what would you make it? I'm almost having a hard time.
Yeah, I know. I have a hard time like envisioning even what it could look like. I mean, I think the idea of having women answer questions to a panel of judges on some real topic, I would just like them to be fully clothed, right? Where their breasts aren't hanging out while they're being intelligent. And the talent competition where your talent isn't pole dancing. Like maybe if your talent was playing the piano. I mean, there are so many beautiful musicians who are so talented. Or if your talent was great oration and speeches, that would be something I would want my daughters to watch. Mm-hmm. So, cut all of the sexualized stuff. Like, who's going to
Well, it's funny you say that sexualized stuff because it's like, to me, it kind of is hilarious that the trans issue is causing a little bit of a confusion for some of the lust industry. So, like, it took until Hugh Hefner died before Playboy magazine apparently put in a trans person in their magazine. And I'm just thinking, like, how do you not understand your audience? It's obvious that, and then Sports Illustrated's got to have people like, we're not just about, these gorgeous, thin women that men are supposed to fantasize about. We're going to be for every woman. And it's like,
every woman.
Stop buying it. I mean, like, if guys are buying it which I'm not suggesting that they should buy this. Okay. I'm obviously against this is the point, but it's like, to me, it's like, all this just gender confusion and like affirming identities and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like kind of hilarious. It's kind of bringing to the forefront, like, what is it really? What is the nature of what this is anyway?
Don't you think though, that if it made business sense, they would stop that? So clearly there must be some incentive for them. Are they scared of the internet mob? Like, people don't just make decisions. Big businesses like that don't just make decisions willy nilly because they want to be.
Wait, you're saying big businesses don't make colossal mistakes, like, hello, right, Coca-Cola came out with new Coke. I know that was before you're born, but like, businesses can make massively stupid decisions sometimes, so
it
happens.
Has it not been, walk it back?
Has it not been long
the
enough?
whole point is like, that they need to become relevant. They need to try to do something new. So Miss Universe and Miss America or whatever used to be on network TV. It used to be a very big thing. And then over time, because what happened was, like, in the 70s and 80s, so like the women would like go, wow, these women look beautiful. And the guys are like, yeah, these women look beautiful. And so then after a while, women are like, wait a minute now, I don't know if we want this bikini stuff. And it was one thing if they're in like a beautiful evening gown or something like this. And so it became a little bit more it's maybe not so important. And networks got, okay, well, we're not getting as many eyeballs. So then it becomes like, cable TV thing. And then there was like, what, we got to find out the next thing.
Right.
Yeah, the novelty. What can we do that can get stir up the news and get more people? Because people are like, I didn't even know they still had a Miss Universe. I mean, I know that Trump had it for 10 years ago, but I didn't even know it was
exactly
still
what they wanted you to say, right? Like,
so they need to have a trans guy own it.
And now everyone knows there's a Miss Universe, right?
That's true. Yeah, I have not thought about it at all. So
it's the novelty, it's the clicks.
All fair point, but I think novelty wears off pretty quick. Is all I gotta say. Speaking of novelty,
yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Like, what is it? What can you do that's ever new?
Well, you can make an $100 million statue in Boston for Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
10 million. 10 million.
Oh wait, 10 million. They needed 100
Yeah, I don't
million
want to get
because-
too excited about it.
Yeah, 10 million. They should have used 100 million because it looks like it's missing something. So, I mean, I'm going to put so we're on YouTube. If you guys haven't checked us out on YouTube, come say what's up. But I'm going to put it up on the screen. We've all seen it in this room here. What I'm going to say what they were going for, and then I'll let you interpret whether or not they accomplished that. They were going for an embrace that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had with his wife after he won the Nobel Peace Prize. They cut out everything but the arms, and the statue is brown. And at best, it looks like someone's holding a huge turd. At worst, I don't want to say it over the air, but it is gross. Like, I don't understand how you could give someone $10 million and go for it, and then you come out with this. And like, rightfully so, the internet, I mean, unloaded on this thing. It is gross.
It's really disturbing.
What?
I mean,
Can I just...
and you should watch the little video where they pull away the cover. And the thing is, get aside. This is the scale of the thing. It is 2 stories.
It's massive.
Tall.
Yeah.
And they have this big cover on it. It's a big black, like almost tarp cloth. They pull it away and the whole audience goes, and I don't think it was out of astonishment at the radiant beauty of the kings embracing one another. I mean, my first thought was giant poop because I have a very scatological life right now. I have young children. It's just part of so I just associated it with.
It's poop adjacent.
My second thought was not as pure and holy as just good old poop.
So let's do a power ranking quickly of statues. I'm going to put Pieta up here. And then I'm going to put like the fist from Detroit is pretty cool. I'll put that in the middle. And then I'm going to put this one all the way at the bottom. I don't think it gets worse. Go find me a worse statue and send it to the inbox. LOOPcast at CatholicVote.org. I don't think it exists. This is bad. That's it for this week's LOOPcast. What a doozy. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. So ways that you can help us. We are on YouTube now, so go check us out. It'll be cool. You can see our faces. Also, reviews. Please drop a review wherever you listen to this on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can find us on any platform. Throw us 5 stars. We'd really appreciate it. Boost us in the algorithm. And pray for us. We're all going to the March for Life. We'll be marching for the babies. And just pray for all the marchers, the safety of everyone, and that we can be effective in our cause. So with that.
And if you see us, say hi. We'll be I'll be the one holding a sign.
Yes.
Way to stand out, Josh.
Mercer's really tall.
He'll be the tall Viking.
I'm stealing Michael News. That's me stealing Michael News here.
Michael New, college professor of mine. Fun fact. Taught me economics.
Oh, he's a good guy.
Yeah. All right. So we'll see you on the next one. Take care, guys.